The crystal chandelier above me seemed to dim as my sister's laughter cut through the elegant ballroom like a blade. 200 wedding guests turned to stare as my 8-year-old son pressed closer to my side, his small hand trembling in mine. What happened next would shatter not just my sister's perfect wedding day, but everything I thought I knew about standing up for yourself. If you want to hear how one man's courage changed everything and taught me that sometimes the most unexpected allies come from the most surprising places, make sure to subscribe for daily stories about finding strength in family chaos and discovering your true worth. The Grandview Country Club overlooked the rolling hills of Connecticut like a scene from a magazine. September roses bloomed in perfect arrangements, their deep red petals matching the burgundy silk draping that cascaded from the ceiling. Everything was flawless, expensive, and designed to impress exactly what my sister Victoria had always wanted. I'm Rebecca Matthews, 34 years old, and I work as a pediatric nurse at Hartford Hospital. For the past 8 years, I've been raising my son Lucas as a single mother after my ex-husband walked out when Lucas was just 6 months old. It hasn't been easy juggling 12-hour shifts, school pickups, and the constant worry about making ends meet. But Lucas and I have built a good life together. A small life maybe compared to the grandeur surrounding me today, but it's ours. Victoria, my 29-year-old sister, had always been the princess of our family. Where I was practical and hardworking, she was glamorous and ambitious. Where I chose stability over excitement, she chased dreams that somehow always materialized into reality. Today, she was marrying Christopher Wellington, a successful investment banker whose family owned half of Greenwich, in what the society pages were calling the wedding of the season. But as I watched Victoria glide through her reception in her $10,000 gown, accepting congratulations and air kisses from Connecticut's elite, I felt that familiar knot of inadequacy forming in my stomach. I'd driven up from Hartford with Lucas, both of us dressed in our best, his little navy suit, from Target my dress, from a consignment shop hoping to blend in and celebrate Victoria's happiness without drawing attention to how different we were from everyone else here. Looking back, I should have known that blending in was never going to be an option in my family. The trouble started during cocktail hour. I was standing near the bar, with Lucas trying to keep him entertained, while nursing a single glass of wine, all I could afford to drink, since I was driving home later when my mother Patricia Matthews approached, with her usual air of barely concealed disappointment. At 58, Patricia still carried herself like the debutante she'd been 30 years ago, every gesture calculated to remind people of her social standing. She'd never quite forgiven me for what she called my poor choices, getting pregnant young, marrying someone she deemed unsuitable, and then having the audacity to raise my child alone when that marriage fell apart. "Rebecca, darling, you look nice," she said, her eyes taking in my off-the-rack dress, with the kind of assessment that made me feel like I was being appraised and found wanting. "And Lucas, my goodness, you're getting so tall. Though perhaps we should work on your posture, sweetheart." Lucas straightened automatically, and I felt a flash of anger at how quickly my confident, happy child had been made to feel self-conscious. But before I could respond, Patricia continued, "I do hope you'll be mindful of the other guests tonight, Rebecca. This is Victoria's special day, and well, we want everything to be perfect." The implication was clear. I was a potential source of imperfection, a reminder of the family's less glamorous realities that needed to be managed and contained. "Of course, Mom. We're just here to celebrate Victoria." "Good. And perhaps it would be best if you kept Lucas close. Some of the other children here are from very prominent families, and we wouldn't want any misunderstandings." I watched her glide away to greet a group of women whose jewelry probably cost more than my annual salary, leaving me standing there with the clear message that my son and I were unwelcome complications in Victoria's perfect day. Dinner was served in the main ballroom, with round tables draped in ivory silk and centerpieces that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Lucas and I were seated at table 9, far from the family tables, but close enough to hear everything that happened at the head table, where Victoria held court. The meal passed without incident. Lucas was on his best behavior, using his napkin properly and remembering his please and thank yous. I was actually starting to relax, thinking we might make it through the evening without any drama, when Victoria stood to give her thank you speech. She looked radiant in the spotlight, her blonde hair swept up in an elaborate updo, her smile perfect for the photographer capturing every moment. She thanked Christopher's family, thanked the wedding party, thanked the vendors who had made her dream day possible. Then her eyes found me across the room. "I also want to thank my family for being here tonight," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "My parents, who taught me the importance of making good choices in life." A pause, her gaze lingering on me. "And my sister Rebecca, who taught me what happens when you don't." The laughter that followed was polite but pointed. I felt my cheeks burn as heads turned toward our table guests, craning their necks to get a look at the cautionary tale Victoria had just presented to the room. But she wasn't finished. "Rebecca's here tonight with her son Lucas, my nephew, though I have to admit we don't see them very often. Rebecca's been so busy with her independent lifestyle." More laughter, sharper this time. "But I suppose someone has to show the rest of us what not to do, right?" Lucas looked up at me with confusion in his 8-year-old eyes. "Mom, why is Aunt Victoria saying those things?" I couldn't answer him. I couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was spinning as Victoria continued her speech, each word designed to highlight my failures, my struggles, my status as the family disappointment. She talked about the importance of choosing the right partner, of building a stable life, of not being a burden on your family, all while looking directly at me. Patricia was nodding along approvingly from the family table, her smile encouraging Victoria's cruelty. Other family members were laughing, some looking uncomfortable, but none speaking up to defend me. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. I couldn't let Lucas sit through any more of this. I couldn't let him see his mother being humiliated in front of 200 strangers. I reached for his hand, ready to make a quiet exit and preserve what little dignity I had left. That's when Christopher stood up. Christopher Wellington was not a man I knew well. We'd met a few times during Victoria's engagement brief encounters, where he'd been polite but distant. He was everything Victoria had always wanted. Handsome, wealthy, connected to all the right people. I'd assumed he shared her values, her casual cruelty toward those she deemed beneath her. I was wrong. "Victoria," he said, his voice cutting through her speech like a knife through silk. The microphone picked up his words, broadcasting them to every corner of the ballroom. "Stop." The single word carried such authority that Victoria actually stepped back from the podium. The laughter died instantly, replaced by a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Christopher's walked to the center of the room, his movements deliberate and controlled. When he spoke again, his voice was calm, but filled with a fury that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to address something that just happened here tonight. My bride," he paused the word, carrying a weight of disappointment, "just spent the last 5 minutes publicly humiliating her sister and nephew. A woman who works as a pediatric nurse, who saves children's lives for a living, who has raised a polite, intelligent, wonderful boy as a single mother." He turned to look at Victoria, who had gone pale behind her perfect makeup. "Rebecca Matthews is one of the strongest, most admirable people I've ever met. She works 12-hour shifts to provide for her son. She volunteers at the hospital's charity events, and she's never once asked this family for help, even when she probably needed it." The silence in the room was deafening. I could see guests looking back and forth between Christopher and Victoria, trying to process what was happening. "What I just witnessed," Christopher continued, "was not humor. It was not sisterly teasing. It was cruelty pure and simple. It was a successful, privileged woman punching down at someone who has faced real challenges and overcome them with grace and dignity. He looked directly at me, then his eyes kind and apologetic. Rebecca, I am so sorry. You and Lucas deserve better than this. You deserve to be celebrated, not mocked. Then he turned back to Victoria, and his expression hardened. And you, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. You just showed me exactly who you really are. What happened next unfolded like a scene from a movie. Christopher walked to our table, ignoring the gasps and whispers that followed his movement. He knelt down beside Lucas's chair, bringing himself to my son's eye level. "Hey, buddy," he said gently. "Your mom is pretty amazing, isn't she?" Lucas nodded, still confused, but responding to Christopher's kindness. "She's the best mom in the world. I can see that. And you know what? Any family that can't see how lucky they are to have you both doesn't deserve you." He stood and offered me his arm. "Rebecca, would you and Lucas like to leave this place with some dignity? Because I think we've all had enough of this wedding." I stared at him, unable to process what was happening. This man, Victoria's groom, the center of this elaborate celebration, was offering to walk away from his own wedding to defend me. "Christopher, you can't. This is your wedding day." "No," he said firmly. "This was supposed to be the beginning of my marriage to someone I thought I knew. But the woman I just watched humiliate her own sister in front of 200 people, that's not someone I can marry." The ballroom erupted in chaos. Victoria was screaming. Patricia was trying to calm her down, and guests were pulling out their phones to capture the drama unfolding before them. But in the center of it all, Christopher stood calm and resolute, his arm still extended to me. I took it. Lucas and I walked out of that ballroom with Christopher Wellington, leaving behind the wreckage of what was supposed to be the social event of the season. As we reached the exit, I heard Victoria's voice rising above the chaos, screaming my name, blaming me for ruining her perfect day. But for the first time in my life, I didn't turn back to apologize. I didn't try to fix what someone else had broken. I kept walking. Christopher walked us to our car in the parking lot, the September evening air cool against our faces. After the stifling atmosphere of the ballroom, Lucas had been quiet during our exit, processing everything he'd witnessed, but now he looked up at Christopher with the directness that only children possess. "Are you going to marry Aunt Victoria now?" Christopher knelt down again, his expensive tuxedo forgotten as he met my son's eyes. "No, buddy, I'm not." Sometimes grown-ups realize they've made a mistake, and the brave thing to do is admit it and make it right. Like when I broke Mom's favorite mug and told the truth instead of hiding it. Exactly like that, your mom taught you well. I felt tears threatening for the first time that evening. Not tears of humiliation or anger, but something deeper. Gratitude maybe, or recognition. This man had just blown up his own life to defend mine, and he was talking to my son like he mattered, like his questions deserved real answers. "Christopher," I started, but he held up a hand. "Rebecca, I need you to know something. What happened in there that wasn't about you? That was about Victoria, showing her true character, and me finally seeing it clearly. You didn't ruin anything. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." He stood and handed me a business card. "If you ever need anything, a reference, help with Lucas's college fund, anything, please call me. You're the kind of person who makes the world better just by being in it." As we drove home that night, Lucas fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of the evening. I replayed Christopher's words in my mind, trying to reconcile them with the image I'd carried of myself for so long. The family disappointment, the cautionary tale, the one who'd made all the wrong choices. Maybe I thought the problem wasn't with my choices. Maybe the problem was with people who couldn't see the value in a life built on love and hard work instead of money and status. The story of Victoria's wedding spread through Connecticut's social circles like wildfire. By Monday morning, it was the talk of every country club, every charity luncheon, every gathering of the wealthy and well-connected. The bride whose groom walked out after defending her sister became the cautionary tale Victoria had always claimed I was. Patricia called me 3 days after the wedding, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Rebecca, you need to fix this. Victoria is devastated. Christopher won't return her calls, and people are talking. This is all your fault. For 34 years, I'd been trained to accept blame. For things that weren't my fault, to apologize for existing, to make myself smaller so others could feel bigger. But something had changed in me during those moments in the ballroom, when Christopher stood up for me. No, Mom, I didn't humiliate Victoria in front of 200 people. I didn't mock her struggles or make her feel worthless. I didn't cause Christopher to see who she really is. Victoria did all of that herself. How dare you? How dare I? What, tell the truth? Stand up for myself. Refuse to be your family's scapegoat anymore." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. "If you don't apologize to your sister and try to fix this mess, you're no longer welcome in this family." The threat that would have devastated me a week ago now felt almost liberating. "Mom, I haven't been welcome in this family for years. You just made it official." I hung up and felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Peace. 6 months later, I was sitting in my small apartment in Hartford, helping Lucas with his homework at our kitchen table, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Christopher's name, and I answered with curiosity rather than anxiety. "Rebecca, I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "Not at all. How are you, Christopher?" "I'm good. Really good, actually. I wanted to let you know that Victoria and I finalized the end of our engagement last week. The wedding vendors, the deposits, all of it. It's officially over." "I'm sorry it came to that." "I'm not. Best decision I ever made was walking away from that ballroom with you and Lucas. It showed me what real character looks like." He paused, and I could hear traffic in the background. "I also wanted to tell you that I've been thinking about what you said that night about working with children. I've started volunteering at a youth center in New Haven, helping kids with financial literacy. It's the most rewarding work I've ever done." "Christopher, that's wonderful. You inspired that, Rebecca, you and Lucas. Watching how you've built a life based on what really matters, it changed my perspective on everything." After we hung up, I looked around my small apartment with fresh eyes. The secondhand furniture, the photos of Lucas and me at various stages of his childhood, the nursing textbooks stacked on the counter, the art projects covering the refrigerator. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. It was built on love and hard work, and the kind of values that couldn't be bought or inherited. Lucas looked up from his math homework pencil, eraser marks smudged on his cheek. "Mom, was that Mr. Christopher?" "Yes, sweetheart." "I like him. He's nice to you." "Yes, he is. Not like Aunt Victoria." I sat down beside my son, this amazing little person who had been my anchor through every storm, my reason for getting up every morning, my proof that love could triumph over circumstance. "Lucas, what do you think makes someone part of a family?" He considered this with the seriousness he brought to all important questions. "Being nice to each other, taking care of each other, like how you take care of me when I'm sick and I help you when you're sad." That's exactly right. Family isn't just about who you're related to. It's about who chooses to love you and stand by you. So Mr. Christopher is kind of like family now. In a way, yes. He chose to stand up for us when we needed someone to. That makes him family in the way that really counts. A year after Victoria's wedding, I received an invitation in the mail. Victoria was getting married again this time, to someone from her social circle who apparently found her behavior acceptable. The invitation was addressed only to me. No +1 for Lucas. No acknowledgement that I had a son who was her nephew. I threw it away without a second thought. That same week, Lucas came home from school with a permission slip for a field trip that required a parent chaperone. As I signed my name on the form, He looked up at me with those serious eyes that reminded me so much of myself at his age. Mom Jenny's mom asked me if I was sad that I don't have a dad like the other kids. My pen paused over the paper. This was the conversation I'd been dreading and preparing for since Lucas was old enough to notice that our family looked different from others. What did you tell her? I told her that I have you, and you're worth like 10 regular parents, and that some kids have dads who don't take care of them. But I have a mom who takes care of me better than anyone. I set down the pen and pulled my son into a hug. This wise, compassionate little person who had somehow learned to see strength where others saw lack, love where others saw limitation. You know what, Lucas? You're absolutely right. We may not look like other families, but we have something that can't be bought or inherited or given to us by anyone else. We have each other, and we have the knowledge that we can handle whatever life throws at us. Because we're a team. Because we're a team. The best team I know. 2 years after that disastrous September evening, I was invited to another wedding, Christopher's. He was marrying a woman named Amanda, a teacher he'd met while volunteering at the youth center. The invitation included Lucas by name and came with a handwritten note. Rebecca, you taught me what real family looks like. I hope you and Lucas will be part of mine. We went to the wedding, Lucas in a new suit that Christopher had insisted on buying for him, me in a dress I'd actually purchased new for the occasion. It was a small ceremony, intimate and warm, filled with people who genuinely cared about the couple getting married. During the reception, Christopher asked me to dance. As we moved slowly around the floor, he smiled down at me with the same kindness he'd shown that night 2 years ago. You know, Rebecca, I never thanked you properly for what you did that night. What I did, Christopher, you're the one who, you showed me what integrity looks like. You could have stayed in that ballroom, could have accepted Victoria's cruelty to avoid making waves, but you stood up to leave to protect your son's dignity and your own. That took more courage than anything I did. I was just trying to get Lucas out of there before he hurt any more. Exactly. You put your child's well-being above your own comfort, above your desire to fit in with your family. That's what real strength looks like. As the song ended, Lucas appeared at my elbow, having charmed his way through the reception with the confidence of a child who knew he was valued and wanted. Mom, Mrs. Amanda said I can help serve the cake. Can I? Of course, sweetheart. I watched him run off to help this boy who had learned to see himself as worthy of love and respect because I had finally learned to see myself that way. The cycle of shame and inadequacy that had defined my relationship with my own family would end with me. Lucas would grow up knowing his worth, knowing that he deserved a seat at any table, knowing that the people who truly mattered would make room for him without being asked. 5 years have passed since Victoria's wedding, and I can honestly say it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because I enjoyed being humiliated, but because it forced me to confront a truth I'd been avoiding my entire adult life. Some relationships are too toxic to salvage, even when they're with family. Lucas is 13 now, a confident teenager who plays soccer and volunteers at the hospital with me on weekends. He's never asked about Victoria, or Patricia never expressed sadness about the family members who chose to exclude us from their lives. Children, I've learned, have an innate understanding of who deserves their energy and attention. I still work as a pediatric nurse, but I've also started teaching classes for single mothers, sharing the financial and emotional strategies that helped me build a stable life for Lucas and myself. Christopher was right. That night, my struggles weren't something to be ashamed of. They were proof of my strength, evidence of what's possible when you refuse to give up on yourself or the people you love. Last month, I received a Facebook message from a woman I didn't recognize. She'd heard about my story through mutual friends and wanted to thank me for showing her that it was possible to walk away from family members who treated her badly. She'd been enduring years of criticism and manipulation from her own relatives, accepting it because they're family. My example had given her permission to choose her own well-being over their expectations. That message reminded me of something Christopher had said that night in the parking lot. "You're the kind of person who makes the world better just by being in it." At the time, I'd thought he was just being kind. Now I understand that he was telling me a truth I'd never been able to see about myself. These days, our family looks different than it did 5 years ago, but it's stronger and happier than it's ever been. Christopher and Amanda are regular fixtures in our lives, the kind of chosen family that shows up for school plays and birthday parties and ordinary Tuesday dinners. Their children, they have 2, now call me Aunt Rebecca, and Lucas is their devoted honorary big brother. We spend holidays with other chosen family members, my colleague Sarah, whose parents live across the country, Mrs. Chen from our apartment building, whose children rarely visit, the Johnsons from Lucas's soccer team, who welcomed us into their circle of friends without question or judgment. This is what family really looks like. Not perfect people connected by blood, but imperfect people connected by choice, by love, by the decision to show up for each other when it matters most. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed in that ballroom, if I'd endured Victoria's mockery in silence and tried to smooth things over afterward. Would I still be accepting scraps of attention from people who saw me as a burden? Would Lucas have learned that his worth was determined by other people's opinions of his mother? I'm grateful I'll never know the answers to those questions. Last week, Lucas came home from school with an assignment to write about someone who had shown courage in their life. He chose to write about me, about the night I stood up and walked out of Victoria's wedding. Reading his essay, I saw that night through his eyes, not as a moment of family drama, but as a moment when his mother chose dignity over acceptance, self-respect over keeping the peace. My mom taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who don't treat you right, even if they're family, he'd written. She showed me that we don't have to accept being treated badly just because someone is related to us. We can choose to be around people who see our worth and celebrate it, instead of trying to tear us down. As I read those words, I realized that the scared, humiliated woman who had stood up in that ballroom 5 years ago had accomplished something more important than she could have imagined. She had broken a cycle. She had shown her son that he deserved better than conditional love, better than acceptance that came with a price tag of diminished self-worth. The waves of that one moment of courage are still rippling outward, touching lives I may never know, about giving other people permission to choose themselves over toxic relationships, to walk away from tables where they're not truly welcome, and build their own. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting back at the people who hurt you. Sometimes it's building a life so full of genuine love and respect that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant. Sometimes it's raising a child who knows his worth, who will never accept crumbs of affection from people who should be offering full meals of love. And sometimes it's as simple as standing up and walking away, knowing that the people who truly matter will either walk with you or be waiting for you when you find your way to where you belong. The ballroom may have been filled with 200 people that night, but only one of them had the courage to see the truth and act on it. That was enough. That was everything. I am enough. Lucas is enough. We are enough. And that's the most powerful revenge of all. Subscribe to hear more stories about finding your courage in impossible moments and discovering that the family you choose can be stronger than the family you're born into. New inspiring stories every day that'll remind you that walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do.